People say, and it always sounds funny, they say Dizzy invented bop, as if you woke up one morning and said, what am I going to do today? I think I'll invent bop. It can't happen like that, can it?
By a long shot, no. It's a development, actually. Progressive. Same as progressive revelation and religion. Progressive revelation. God only gives you so much knowledge of what He's got in store for you at a specific time in your spiritual development. The same as He has. He only lets a guy create so much for a particular era in the development of our music.
For many years, people have asked the question, why don't other people like my music? Why do they say the genre I listen to isn't real music? What even is real music? These are the questions that I have been striving to solve over the past year of researching this very topic. The concept for my research originated from my experience as a jazz musician. There have been many times where I've expressed my interest for jazz and have played for people, but they seem to say they just don't really like jazz. They say things like, it's just noise. Jazz is just an excuse to play wrong notes. I can appreciate it, but I wouldn't listen to it. I wanted to understand what caused the death of this genre. In this documentary, I will be answering these questions as well as many others that deal with the nature of music and the generational divide that comes along with different genres. It is interesting to see the many ways that genres of music are interwoven with each other, and how each genre evolved over time. I've conducted research with people of many different ages who have discussed their preferences in music and discussed the reasons for liking the genre that they do. In order to solve this problem, we must first find out what influences one's taste in music. One of the main factors that the scientific community agrees on is exposure. Have you ever went to the store and heard a song that you didn't really like? Then you turn on the radio and hear that same song. Then again, you hear it at a party. And before you know it, you're listening to the song all the time. This is a classic example of what psychologists call the mere exposure effect. It states that the more you are exposed to something, the more your opinion of it becomes favorable. The mere exposure effect can be applied to many things outside of music, such as TV shows, shapes, colors, and even people. As you're exposed to these things again and again, you start to like them regardless of your original opinion. This is particularly relevant to music, as many people who were exposed to certain music at a young age will continue to listen to that music for the rest of their life. Psychologists say the age of 14 is a very distinct age, because the type of music listened to at that age will most likely stick with the person for the rest of their life. A study conducted in the late 1990s by the University of Illinois dealt with preferences in different time periods of popular music. Their goal was to find out what era of music was the greatest, so they asked college students what era of music they liked best. Most of the students responded that they liked 90s music, which was expected, but they also said they enjoyed music from the late 1960s. So, obviously they found it, right? The golden age of music. Well, not exactly. Around 10 years later, the same study was conducted, and the findings were much different. They found that college students now liked music from the early 1980s. Well, this is weird. From the last study, we saw that students liked music from the 1960s. Upon closer inspection, it's actually super clear why this would be the case. The students from the 90s had parents that grew up in the 60s. Because of this, their parents played music from the 60s and their kids were exposed to it. With the students from the early 2010s, their parents grew up listening to the music of the 1980s, and thus exposed it to their children. To further understand this principle, I sat down with a student from my school, Will Ryan, and he believes he is a product of this very principle. Hey Will, so I heard you like 80s music. Can you tell me what influenced that?
So basically, with the 80s music, my parents were always into it, so they would play it when I was a kid, and it sort of brings me back to when I was a kid whenever I play it, so they really got me hooked on it.
So it's clear that the mere exposure effect has great influences in what music people are going to listen to. But what other factors could be causing this disparity?
What's gonna play that game? Oh boy! What's gonna play that game? Shalimar, Swanee Shore. Let me dig this jive once more, boy. Right on down to the gate. Oh boy! Gotta take time and get. Now can't you hear those hepcats call? Come on, boys, let's have a ball.
To gather more information, I surveyed 100 students in my school and asked them what their most and least favorite genre of music was. The results were quite interesting. The most popular genres were the usual pop, rap, rock, and R&B. Moving down the list, we get to more niche genres such as Latin, punk, jazz, and musical theater. What was quite interesting to see, however, was what these students responded to when I asked them their least favorite genre. Only 11% of people responded that they didn't have one, so this means 89% have strong opinions about their least favorite music. Surprisingly, only 2 people responded that they disliked jazz, and not one person said they disliked classical. These results were so surprising that I had to do some research into why this might be the case. What I found was that the music that students said they liked best are actually heavily influenced by the genres of classical and jazz. For example, let's take Maroon 5's 2019 pop hit Memories. I'll play an excerpt here from the chorus.
Here's to the ones that we got. Cheers to the wish you were here, but you're not. Cause the drinks bring back all the memories of everything we've been through.
Now let's compare that to the well-known classical piece by Johann Pachelbel from the Baroque era called Canon in D. We see that these pieces virtually have the exact same melody and chord progression, with only a few notes switched around. The reason Maroon 5 is able to do this is because the piece from Pachelbel is already in the public domain. This means anyone can use it because it's no longer copyrighted. Let's say pop isn't your thing. Take a listen to this verse from Eric Carmen's 1975 hit, All By Myself.
When I was young, I never needed anyone, and making love was just for fun. Those days are gone.
Now here is the second movement of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. It is clear that classical has heavily influenced musicians in pop music. Well, what about jazz and R&B? Take a listen to the beginning of Beyoncé's Crazy in Love. Now here's the 1970 song, Are You My Woman, by the Shy-Lights. Samples from jazz and soul music are frequently used in pop and rap music today, and based on the results of my survey, it's clear that younger students are hearing these similarities. Well, then what are the genres these students don't like? The survey asking about the most disliked genre of music gave me some very interesting results. I found that the students at my school really disliked the 3 genres of country, K-pop, and heavy metal. I wasn't sure why this was the case, so I spoke to my friend Nick Maniscalco, who is a big fan of heavy metal, and asked him what he thought of this.
Hey, Nick.
Hey, Jesse.
Okay, so I want to know, like, when did you start listening to metal, and like, why did you get into it in the first place?
Basically, I've been listening to metal my whole life. You know, I started off like listening to metal in the car with my dad as a kid, and growing up, it just kind of stuck with me. I like it. I started liking it because there's no other music that feels like metal. I feel like with metal, you feel it the most. It's really heavy hitting, and there's no other type of music like metal that you feel the same way about.
So I took a survey of the students at our school, and I asked them what their least favorite genre of music was. And 15% of them said that it was metal. So why do you think this is, and like, what do you have to say?
Because people don't see the good in it. Like the reason why most people like metal is because it's really hard, and like you feel it a lot. And some people, I guess, just don't vibe with it. Which I'm like, I understand. Like that's me with like any other type of music. Like I don't vibe with rap at all, or pop. I don't vibe with that, or country too. Country's like one of my least favorite. I don't vibe with any of that. And I get why people don't like it, because it's just some people hear just screaming. Me though, I don't. I don't know. It's hard to explain because people interpret it different ways. I interpret it as heavy hitting, like intense, like really good music. Other people hear it as blah, 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 and like no one really accepts that.
So obviously, based on what Nick said, we can start to realize that ultimately, much of what music genre preferences come down to are exposure and opinion. We also know that music is a heavily emotional art form, and thus, one's life experiences shape what music we listen to. This has been seen time and time again, as our influences in the world around us affect the clothes we wear and the music we listen to. It's the same reason that techno music began to take over the music scene in the late 80s and 90s, at the same time that personal computers became commonplace. It's the reason that the Beatles visiting India led to rapid change into more exotic and psychedelic clothing in the late 1960s. These culture differences are what we can account for the other two disliked genres, country and K-pop. Though the students at my school in New Jersey said country was their most disliked genre, according to a study by Deezer in May of 2018, nearly 50% of Americans say that they have a favorable opinion of country, especially in southern states, with these styles and chord progressions being commonplace. We can say the same about K-pop, with it originating in Korea. These realizations are nothing new, as many experts in music have studied how music can have different meanings based on culture. Take a listen to this chord. Many Westerners would associate this sound with a joyous connotation, and this chord being viewed as possessing a somber connotation. Though this may seem obvious to us, not everyone around the world and at different points in time gets the same feeling when hearing these chords. Take a listen to the first piece of music that is known to have ever been written. This piece dates back to 1400 BC and originates in an area of northern Syria. It's tough for us to imagine what the composer was thinking when this tune was written, because it could have been completely different than our interpretation. When for us this may seem somber, maybe the original writer meant for this to be a song of joy. It's the same reason that audiences today may not get the jokes from older stand-up comedians. Though these were considered the pinnacle of comedy at their time, their messages and punchlines may not resonate with listeners now. What we know for sure is that music is an extremely special art form, and it is like no other. It has a deep connection to the human soul, and based on the experiences and beliefs of a given person, we can determine why one likes a particular style of music, or if they have a distaste for one. I urge that more research and development into this particular concept be conducted by the music industry, and I have reached out to several professors who study music theory. By taking a deep look into the why behind music, we can get to the heart of the listener, in the same way that an author may direct his or her message to a specific person or group. These factors that influence music genre preferences, such as exposure, culture, emotion, and time, should be examined by listeners so that they can get to the heart of why their favorite playlist or album is what it is. In my life, I definitely feel that these three aspects of exposure, emotional connections, and culture have influenced the music that I listen to. Here's one of my all-time favorite artists, Bob Dylan, and I feel that my opinion of him has much to do with exposure from my father. I believe everyone should try to look at these three aspects of music preferences within themselves and analyze why they like the music they do. They may end up learning something about themselves that they didn't know before.
How many roads must a man walk down before you call him a man? Yes, and how many seas must a white dove sail before she sleeps in the sand? Yes, and how many times must the cannonballs fly before they're forever banned? The answer, my friend, is a blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. How many years must a mountain exist before it is washed to the sea? Yes, and how many years can some people exist before they're allowed to be free? Yes, and how many times must a man turn his head and pretend that he just doesn't see? The answer, my friend, is a blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing